All right, good morning. So this video is going to cover looking at one of the strophes that was assigned for the Whitman poem. If you look at the syllabus, it asks us, or it says that the videos that we'll cover today are going to deal with Song of Myself, close reading example, student responses, citations, and validity. So I'm going to work on the first three within this one video. It may end up being a two-parter, but I'm going to be talking about how does Whitman utilize imagery, and how can we close read that. So I'll start with that. Before I get into that, one comment I want to make is about your response journals and let you know that as they come in, that's how they get graded. So I'm still have more to get through, but I will get through those, this morning to this afternoon, and you'll have them back before Wednesday morning. So you know what to work on for the second one. I do see in those responses some pretty common moves that I see in 102 and really all throughout the English courses. Comments that deal with things saying, like the poet uses an image to express the emotion or to convey the meaning. Words like powerful and meaningful jump out a lot in these. And what we want to do is we want to become more specific with that. So the examples I'm going to give you this morning are designed to show you what specificity looks like within a close reading. And remember, a close reading is just paying attention to the component parts of a larger piece to make an argument about the piece as a whole. So it's going to be helpful that if you haven't really paid close attention to the earlier Whitman videos, that you go and do that before we jump into this one, because I'll be referencing some of those points as we go forward. With that said, another thing I want you to think about before I really get into the poem is that any kind of feedback that you have with the video content or the assignments, the reading lists, anything that you want to let me know, please feel free to email me so that I can adjust as we go forward. We're all very new to this, professors and students alike. So please feel free to let me know if something isn't getting covered or you're getting confused, or if you would like more information. I'm happy to make more videos about this length, and also if the length works for you as well, if that's something you want to let me know. So I'm going to share my screen with you real quick and get us back to the poem. So remember, Walt Whitman's Song of Myself, right? We've read 1, 5, 6, and 7 together. I'm actually going to be looking at a different one of these. I'm going to look at section 6 today. Section 6 is a very famous section, or strophe, I should say, a strophe where it's relatively long for what we've read so far, and it has in it a kind of plot. All right, so a plot means, again, a narrative that has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and it tells a story, usually develops tension, and then relieves it, right? The old rising action to climax to denouement, right? That model that perhaps you saw in high school at some point. So it has a bit of a narrative to it. It's image driven. So remember, an image, right, is going to be something that deals with our sensory experience of the universe, where an abstraction is more about an idea. Okay. And in this particular one, it goes back to an image that he's using from the very beginning, the title of his book. So the plot of this one is that a child comes up to the speaker of the poem, and we always want to say speaker of the poem and not Walt Whitman, and never Walt. All right. So, and the reason for that is that Walt Whitman as a human being is different than the speaker of a poem. Right? We would call what Walt Whitman wrote is a bardic voice, B-A-R-D-I-C, bardic. And what that means is that he was speaking as a kind of persona, right? So it's not necessarily always Walt Whitman, it's always the speaker of the poem. And the reason for this, the main point of this is I can't prove what Walt Whitman thinks, right? I don't know anything about his actual experience. Poets have a tendency to lie, right? In order to get an emotional truth across, they might tell a factual inaccuracy. But the speaker of the poem, I can account for that speaker. So I'm going to talk about that. I may interchange those, and if I do, that's on me, and I'll try to get better about that, as I hope that you get better about it as well, because I'm nowhere near perfect. I think you can tell that probably by my hairline. So 6 begins with the child running up to the speaker of the poem and asks a question, and it's in italics here, right? And the child says, "What is the grass?" And he runs up to Whitman, he runs up to the speaker of the poem with this in his full hands. Okay, so it's a very childlike question, right? This idea of what is grass, right? It's something that a child's going to ask. Now, if you were to try to answer that question, you probably would have an answer. You're educated, you've taken courses. So you could maybe call it like it's vegetation, it's xylem and phloem, it has chlorophyll and photosynthesis, and all of those answers, of course, would be correct, right? But is that going to satisfy a child? A child doesn't really care about those kind of parts. So he wants to know, the child wants to know, what is it, right? Can you please give me this sort of philosophical understanding of grass? Why does it exist? Why is it here? Why isn't it something else? Right? A very childlike question. And in many ways, he tells us here, how can I answer the child? So notice in this poem already, in this strophe, the use of questions seem to be important, right? So we can write that down over here and in our notes and think about, how do questions interact with this poem? What do they have to do with thinking about the self? Remember, this is a song of myself going forward. So already within the first stanza here, remember, this is a line, okay? This is a sentence. I'm sorry. This is a sentence here. I know it's a full sentence. I have a semicolon here, which tells me that these two are connected. So this is a line again, all right? This is a sentence, and this is a stanza. The white space here between these two, this is called a stanza break. Just as at the end of a line, after the semicolon, we call a line break. Right? So just kind of knowing some of our terminology. In poetry, we can talk about the breaks and the white space here, the empty space, the negative space, to use an art term, as much as we can talk about the actual content here. They interact with one another. This is pretty much high level stuff. This kind of goes into later in the semester, but it's just nice to have that right now. So in this space, the child runs up. The speaker of the poem says, how could I answer the child? I don't know. I do not know what it is any more than he. And again, this is a moment where maybe as a reader, we think, well, of course, you know what grass is. It's that. It's that. But again, that doesn't satisfy a child. The child's curiosity wants more of a complete answer than that one. So he goes into this and he starts using a word that you're going to see happen a number of times. Okay. So I guess he doesn't know. So part of this whole strophe is about not knowing, but trying to figure it out. Very much like a scientific method here. I don't know what it is, but let me give it a shot. The first thing he tries to say is it's an image, right? It's an image, and it's a metaphor at the same time, right? It's a thing standing for another thing, and he says the grass is a flag. Okay, so now it's an image of a flag. We all know what a flag is, right? It denotes a kind of identity. Right? It tells us where we are, where we belong, right? That's a very important image, especially in American culture. The flag is a very important image. So he says, I guess it must be the flag of my disposition or how I feel. So the grass is a marker, a symbol of how I feel, and it is out of hopeful green stuff woven. And this word really stands out in this moment, I would say. This idea that he says to the child, or it says to himself at the same time, I don't know what it is, but my guess here is that it is a symbol for my internal experience, and that it's woven out of hope. Okay, so that's my first answer to you as a child, because photosynthesis isn't going to help you, but maybe this does. Okay, but then that doesn't really satisfy him, and I have another stanza break. So the stanza break tells me that in here, right, he gave it a shot in this line, but he wasn't able to complete that idea. He takes a break, takes a pause with the stanza break, and he tries again. Or, I guess, and that or there tells me he's not sure, right? Just as this is telling me he's not sure, all right? And it's so nice to hear, like when adult and the child interact, that the adult's not just giving facts, right? And then telling the child to run along. And this he's saying, I still don't know, but he says that maybe it's the handkerchief. So it's still kind of similar as an image, right? The flag is still, it's cloth, it's created, it's made, but it's relatively larger, right? And this time he's like, now it's smaller. In some ways it's smaller, in some ways it's even larger. He says that it's the handkerchief of the Lord, right? So it's an image now of a thing that God or the Lord would carry, the creator, right? For another word here for the Lord. And that it's a scented gift and a remembrance or designedly dropped. So in other words, it's God's handkerchief. It's the thing that he, she, they had that dropped very particularly, designedly, right, with purpose. And it bears the owner's name some way in the corners that we may see and remark and say whose. So in other words, he's saying, if I look out at the grass and I see it as kind of like God's handkerchief, and in the corner somewhere, you have the initials of God, which you've ever seen like a sort of fancy handkerchief, which aren't really in vogue anymore, but they used to be, where you might have the owner's initials up in the corner. That tells you whose this handkerchief is, you know, something that you would reuse again and again and again, hopefully washing in between. But he's basically saying that's what it is, right? Maybe grass is like God's handkerchief. It's this way that we can, when we look out at the earth, and I'm looking out my window right now, I'm just randomly staring at something. But if I look out at the grass outside, I could say, yeah, that's proof, you know, for the speaker of this poem here, that God had a plan. That's what it is. That's his design. Okay, so and weirdly, while a child may not understand and grasp or appreciate the answer of, oh, it's vegetation that depends upon photosynthesis and the Krebs cycle, they might actually answer to this one, right? Oh, it's a handkerchief of God. A child might be like, oh yeah, sure, that makes perfect sense, because a child's imagination doesn't mind that kind of an answer, but he's still not happy, right, with this answer. So he tries again. Itself as a child. Oh, okay. Fair enough. What's grass? Well, it's like it's a child. It's a babe of the vegetation, right? So in and of itself, the grass becomes a child. So as we see, the images kind of change. It goes from flag to handkerchief to child. So this is a big jump. The first two images, both are things that can be woven, created, and made, right, through cloth and fabric and sewing. And child can also be made, is also made, but in a different way, right? A different product. It's a product of sexual power. And Whitman's poem, if you were to read all 52 sections, he's very interested in sexual energy, and the power of that and what creates this and this produced babe of the vegetation. So he's saying that when we look out at the world, we're seeing reproduction. We're seeing, love, the process of love, and physical love on top of that. And then he moves to another one, or I guess it's the uniform hieroglyphic. So a hieroglyphic, right, is a kind of, if you've ever seen these before, it's a kind of language, right? It's a kind of written system. And so in this way, he's saying, I don't know, but it may be when we look at grass, it's like a rune. It's a hieroglyphic. I can read the grass, for lack of a better word. And it means, if I were to read it, and I'm translating now, that's what he's going to try to do. I'm translating the language of grass. And he says that what it means is that the grass sprouts alike in broad and narrow zones among black folks and white, and then Canuck, Tuckahoo, right, both tribes, congressman and cuff, these are people. And he said, I give them the same and I receive them the same. So in other words, if we read grass, what grass says is that I am everywhere, right? I grow everywhere inside of this space, and I connect people regardless of race or job or personality. And in the end, I'll take them all in, right? And that's a reference to burial, to death. He says that what the grass means is that you're all the same to the grass, or we, I should say, are all the same to the grass. The grass doesn't care. It will take you in, it will receive you. It will take you in, and then it will decompose you, and then it will put you back out in the world. So when we see grass, we're seeing the decomposition, and the rebirth, right? The scientific rebirth of the bodies, right? Of all bodies, not just people, right? Not just people, but of animals and all types of vegetation. It is evidence that life has another way to continue. And kind of a beautiful idea. So it's a language in this sense, and it's a child, and it's a handkerchief of the Lord, and it's a flag. Maybe it's none of these things. He doesn't know. He's saying, I don't know, but I'm trying here, right? And I think, again, children appreciate that. So he keeps going on in this one, and he arrives at one of the more famous lines of a Walt Whitman poem. And now it seems to me the beautiful uncut hair of graves. So this beautiful image here is that if you've ever been to a cemetery or a graveyard, right, it's that's the grass is what we see, right? It's typically kind of manicured, it's created a little bit in our culture, but it would be an uncut hair. So we could look at a graveyard and say, like, that's a very manicured space. This is where we bury our dead in our culture. And it's been trimmed. That's like a good haircut, right? That all of the dead that are there, as they've decomposed and gone back into the soil and then risen up as grass, that's their hair. But he's saying, if you just look at it like an unkept field of grass, you're going to see that this is also that's a graveyard, right? Every field of grass is a graveyard because animals die, people die, animals die, and as they go into the earth, they come back up, and you can see that in the grass. The grass is proof of the hair of graves. Okay, so it's a dark image, but it's not at the same time, because it's beautiful and it's uncut. In other words, it's natural, nature without check with original energy, he says at the beginning. And here's an example of that. So we see, pardon me, we see now a shift inside of the poem, where from here on out, all the way to the end of this one, he's going to start talking about death. So he arrives at this image from grass of being a type of vegetation and life, and about God and design, and this idea of flag of disposition. And he arrives at this to end on a place of, and it gets there from here, I received them the same, that because grass will take everyone in simultaneously, and remember that he's living in a time, as we are at this very moment, of great division in the country that led to a civil war. He's saying that if you think you're so important because of the color of your skin or your job or your name or how you understand the indigenous population, if you think that there are all these hierarchies of self and importance and humanity, well, wait until the end, because in the end it doesn't really matter, right? You will be buried and you will be dead, and the grass does not care, right? And because of that, that leads him into thinking about them being grasses, being the beautiful uncut hair of graves. And then that will lead him into the second half of this particular strophe. And he'll talk about that for a while. And in the next video, I'll cover that. But what I want to point out here is that what I'm trying to do here is really focus on words that stand out to me, words also that I see repeated, okay? And understanding the power of why it is that a poem about the song of myself would include questions and the word guess and repetition of this and God and understanding disposition and flag and children and death. And all of this is because he is trying to, as we might say in response, make a powerful message, but that message we need to be clear about. And right now, I can't be incredibly clear because I haven't read the whole thing and really come up with my argument. But what the idea that I would say is that, yes, it's a powerful message, but the message is it has something to do with that grass is a symbol for something much larger than just grass. Grass is a stand-in for what it means to be alive, for what it means to have creation, for what it means to be alive and recognize death. It's also an image that tells us that we all are connected in a way that's way more simple than we tend to make. We make it much more complicated. So grass is actually a complicated symbol of simplicity, all right, and connection. So I'm going to go ahead and let this particular video end. I'll do a part 2 to this, and then hopefully finish up with that, and then we'll go from there. So thank you very much.